Now you'll sit over here and I'll take you. Okay. WHGE 95.3 FM. Coming up, the Open Eye. Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence only do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on people's minds are deep and difficult to remove. Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs, your third eye optometrist and host. And today we are going to have a special guest to help you get your eye open. My dear friend and brother in the struggle, and Dr. Yasser Payne. Welcome to the show, Dr. Payne.
Thank you for having me. Definitely.
All right. Tell you a little about Dr. Payne. Yasser Arafat Payne is a professor of sociology in the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice and the Department of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware. Dr. Payne completed his doctoral work at the Graduate Center, University of New York, where he was trained as a social personality psychologist. Also, he completed a NIH-funded postdoctoral fellowship in public health at Hunter College, where he worked on re-entry project with male adolescents in Rikers Island. And that's just a little bit. That's just a little bit of what this brother has done. All right. One of the main reasons that I had Dr. Payne on is to talk about his book, Murder Town, USA. And if you could, move up to the mic there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And helps to turn your mic on.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Brother Vaughn, I see you. Welcome to the show. And the first thing I want to do is talk about your book, of course, Murder Town, USA. Homicide, Structural Violence, and Activism in Wilmington. First thing I want to do is ask you to tell us about your co-authors.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yes, we put out the family, the Wilmington Street Park family, and we've been at it since 2009, late 2009. So we got some years under our belt now. But Murder Town USA captures that legacy, and I had the wonderful opportunity, blessing, privilege, honor to write that book with Dr. Brooklyn Hitchens. And, of course, my big brother, my OG, my mentor, taught me so much about life. And continues to teach me so much about life, but also Daryl Chambers, right? That's that brother who really opened up the city to me, and through him I was able to meet so many wonderful people, including Mr. Patrice Gibbs. So the three of us, yes, myself, Dr. Hitchens, and the soon-to-be Dr. Daryl Chambers.
Also known as Wolfie.
Yes, Wolfie.
Yes, indeed. We can get a little review first on Murder Town, USA. Murder Town, USA covers essential terrain for sociologists and other social scientists to more aggressively venture into such that the complexities of contemporary African American life can be more fully unpacked. The scholarship is sound and the writing is clear. That's from Alfred A. Young Jr., author of The Edge of the Ghetto, African Americans and the Work and the World of Work. Okay, that's just one of the reviews. Dr. Payne, how do you yourself think that Murder Town USA has been received?
Great question, big question. I think overall, definitely lots of love and warmth and support, definitely from folk inside the neighborhoods to folk in the suburbs, and definitely we've received, a lot of good support about the book throughout the academy and amongst other scholars. Keep in mind, the Wilmington Street Park program, in many respects, of course, I'm biased, but we are the most aggressive, on-the-ground, community-based, grassroots research program, particularly around gun violence, policing, reentry, those kinds of issues. Mm-hmm. We are the most aggressive program in the country, right? Mm-hmm. There's no, and a lot of times, working with you all on the ground, and sometimes I'm like, man, they don't even realize your magic and or your complete or full worth in the context of research, mm-hmm. right? So we travel all over the country presenting our work at different universities, mm-hmm. and in communities as well. And keep in mind, as many of these scholars, who've been exposed to our work have said, in many respects, us are the standard in terms of how to organize folk inside the neighborhoods, particularly those folk who've had experiences with the streets, mm-hmm. to do research activism. So, more pointedly, though, to your question, it's been well received. I think, overall, I think definitely we've ruffled a few feathers. Not surprisingly, or mm-hmm. But we ruffled a few feathers, particularly with some folk in power, city and state leadership. Mm-hmm. The book definitely makes the argument that the gun violence is tied to inequality, a kind of forced extreme poverty that Black Wilmingtonians have been placed in since the period of slavery. Mm-hmm. The first 2, possibly 3 chapters, we do a lot on the history of Black Wilmington. Mm-hmm. There never was a time where Wilmington did not struggle with poverty and violence and crime, and we're going back to the 1800s. We even talk about the period of slavery, mm-hmm. right? So when you look at what's going on today in 2024 within a historical context, we can see that it has been the same story generation after generation, right? And this story of extreme poverty being connected to gun violence is socially engineered, right? Mm-hmm. The argument that we're making, socially engineered by the powers that be, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So with that said, we ruffled a few feathers, we called out a few names, but everything that we print or write, right, is documented, well cited, well sourced, right? We don't make anything up, mm-hmm. right? But we help folk understand the evolution of extreme white wealth sitting mm-hmm. right next to extreme Black poverty. Mm-hmm. And let me just end on this point, keep this in mind, because we repeatedly make this argument throughout the book. The wealth, primarily white wealth, but the wealth is tied to Black poverty. In fact, you cannot have one without the other, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of folk, that's a little abstract. They're trying to get it and they don't, and and right? No. We're being very clear. The wealth is tied to the poverty. Economic poverty is required within our economic system, and Black Americans, as we write repeatedly throughout the book, we are the economic outgroup. And for a capitalist economy to function successfully, you must have an economic outgroup. As Michelle Alexander says in The New Jim Crow, mm-hmm. that is the primary job of Black Americans. So generation in, generation out, right? We are structurally sabotaged. Our schools, our economy, our healthcare, you name it, right? And we talk a lot about structural violence, and we ultimately refer to it as the structural violence complex, right? These entities coming about every generation to sabotage your neighborhoods in service of, right? Mm-hmm. White privilege, mm-hmm. economic prosperity, primarily for, certain groups, right? And you cannot have one without the other in this economy. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to start teaching our youth, mm-hmm. right? And definitely the shooters. The shooting, the violence, the homicide mm-hmm. is ultimately tied to the structural violence complex.
Okay. When you say structural violence, could you expand on what that means?
Yes,
because
sir.
I don't think a lot of people understand when you say structural violence. I hear a lot of people say, I'm with Dr. King and I'm for nonviolence. And that's why I asked you to expand on structural violence, because if you're for nonviolence, you have to be for nonviolence across the board.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just really quickly, structural violence theory is ultimately created by a Western European scholar by the name of Dr. Johann Galtung, right? Galtung, Galtung. Structural violence theory, very popular theory amongst researchers and all around the world. And he argues at that point, right, he's actually trying to organize a theory on violence, interpersonal violence, physical violence, gun violence, street violence, right? He just calls the theory. So the theory is actually about street violence, right? But he just calls the theory structural violence, right? And he has these, basically these three prongs of the theory: structural violence, cultural violence is predictive of what he actually calls in '69 direct violence, right? Which means street violence, gun violence, and all that good stuff. He calls it structural violence because he's ultimately arguing that the gun violence or the street violence is predicted by the structural violence. What is structural violence? That's when the powers that be and or when individuals, groups, or communities, right, are prevented from meeting their basic needs by design and or by way of legislation, policy, law, etc. Right? So you would say, why would somebody or the powers that be want to do that, right? Well, keep in mind, particularly within a capitalist economy, right, for the currency to have value, and this is like Galtung, this is what he's ultimately, right, really getting into a conversation about. But for the currency to actually have value, you must have a segment of the population that does not have access to it. Another way of thinking about it: if everybody has $1 million, then what is the $1 million worth? It's worth nothing.
Right. Okay.
Therefore, you have to, and economists write about this all the time, you must stratify the economy with one group, extremely poor group on one end, and one group, extremely wealthy group on the other, and you have a whole bunch of buffer groups in between, right, to create valuation in the currency. Currency is just a piece of paper that we ascribe value to. And in that ascribing, then it actually has some real value because we say it does. The way I teach these concepts in the neighborhoods and the streets, right? We're in Philly, we're in Detroit, we're in Brooklyn with the New Street Park project, right? One of the ways that we teach this in the trainings is I say, okay, well, so you can understand it in a more practical sense in terms of your lived reality, right? And your former lives in the streets. What happens if there's too much coke on the block? What happens if there's too much bosses in the neighborhoods? Oh, okay, we get it now. Oh, okay, too much coke. The value of the cocaine drops. So what do you do to balance out the market? Well, you make sure you take control of the coke and you make sure there's only some bosses out there regulating it, because if you have too many people involved in the market accessing it, then the value of it drops, right? And that is just a kind of a micro way to understand it at the individual level, right? But then you can extrapolate from that example to understand how the overall economy works, right? So structural violence, and then we call it, we rename it, we reframe it, we remix it, structural violence complex. Yes, there is a complex. There are experts, policymakers. We talk about the intentionality, right, of requiring, forcing people into poverty, right? So you have, what we're ultimately arguing is a kind of structural agenda that is orchestrating the wealth and or opportunity in such a way where some are benefiting and others are not, to maintain value in the economy. Now, the problem with it all is this. Propaganda is very, it's very powerful, right? And you have positive and actually negative forms of propaganda. But the way we push messages, right, through imagery, through media, right, the way we sell opportunity in this country, right, is in some respects, many respects, is very deceptive. Only 4% of the U.S. population has $1 million or more. I know Jay-Z, Beyonce, the rappers, and whoever else, Warren Buffett, you get it, whoever, right, creates a different impression as if everybody's walking around and can access the land of milk and honey if and when they want to, and if they didn't, it's because you didn't work hard enough. That's a myth. That's propaganda. Poor people work harder than any group of people. They work longer hours than any group of people. They save more money per capita. We know this, the researchers, right? We also know that white Americans control 90% of the economy.
90%.
They're 60% of the population. And white, whatever it means, right? That's an inflated number because you got a lot of Arabs, Latinos, Native Americans identifying as white, right? But so be it, right? White Americans control 90% of the population, of the economy.
Of the economy.
They are 60% of the population. Trust me, they didn't work that hard in no kind of way, in no fair kind of way to obtain that, right? Wealth, right? Meaning they didn't outwork any other group.
Okay.
Black Americans own, right, controls, some say anywhere between 2 to 4% of the economy. And right, and we've worked hard every generation. Even after the Civil War, right, ended in 1863 or 5, depending how you look at it, right? Black Americans bounced back, unlike any people that we know of in the world. We've been through hell for 200 plus years as slaves, being raped, castrated, and tortured, and right? And the big debate in the mid-1800s after the Civil War was, are these people broken? Look at what they went through. No people, no racial ethnic group ever went through what we went through. Came close to it. And we came out on the other side kicking.
How about that?
Right?
Yeah.
We getting our communities back, opening up our schools, the first HBCUs. We're just doing miraculous. So they had to come back about 10 years after the Civil War, right, with the white terrorist organization, principally the KKK, right, and they were allowed to return us back to the so-called natural order of things. They had never imagined that we will be able to elevate ourselves out of, right, a magnificent story that we have, right? So if we're working hard, if we can bounce back, if we can, Nsoromma, how we doing, brother? Good to see you now. You know, I watch y'all every Saturday. I can't wait till you get on the mic. Oh, man. You know, I just want y'all to know I'm one of the biggest fans of this show.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, bro. Yeah.
Show, right? But if we can do that and we can remain kicking, right, ever since, then at some point, reasonable thinking folk would ask the question then, why are we still remaining in the state of poverty? It's not due to intellect, it's not due to work ethic. The propaganda machine tried to create that impression. We have no empirical evidence of that. So how, right? I said in one speech one time, with a room crowd full of folk, if you just left us alone by the sheer natural volition just of the group, we would have just by now, 21st century, swung ourselves out of economic poverty. So then what is going on? The only way for a group to remain in this standing for so long, the only way that could happen, it would have to be socially engineered.
How about that? Yeah.
That means you theoretically have billions of dollars being poured into a strategy to return us to the natural order of things.
Wow.
Each generation, schools are sabotaged, our jobs are sabotaged, all of our structural opportunities are sabotaged. Right?
And food.
Food, healthcare. And born out of that are, negative outcomes such as gun violence. It's inevitable. There is no poor group in existence or in world history or in any space of the planet where if they're extremely poor, then guess what? Right around the corner somewhere, you're going to find street life.
How about that?
Right?
Yes. Yes, indeed. You know, I have to ask you, what motivated you to get your education?
Yes.
Because I'm sure that, well, I know something about your background. That, you're from Harlem, and I'd like to speak a little bit on that. But what motivated you to get your education? Unfortunately, in this generation, education is somewhat looked down on by some people. I remember my niece made the honor roll, and her peers' reaction was really violent. They actually, a young lady actually stabbed her for getting her education. Yeah.
Your niece?
Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, she put her arm up, so the girl stabbed her in the arm instead of her target, which was to stab her in the chest.
Jesus, Lord of mercy.
And this ideal that getting your education is somehow betraying your community, and I have a quote from you.
Yeah.
Hold to the integrity of your cultural identity. Okay? How are we convincing our next generations that education will not block you from holding on to the integrity of your cultural identity?
Yeah. I think definitely the two are inherently connected, education and cultural identity.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've been studying, look at gun violence here. We write a lot about education, educational experiences of folk in the East Side and Southbridge, I think in chapter 4. But in any event, so I think it's, I was gonna say complicated question, answer, but in some respects very simple, right? So what I have found from all of my studies, including the one where I looked at this in New York, all the way up until this point, what we don't find actually is, even in the streets, and I only look at the streets, what we don't find are actually negative attitudes towards learning, right? I understand what you're saying though, right? So, and that's really why, it gets a little complicated. What we connect, so that's more propaganda. That's why I started testing it, right? Like, hold on. And I never, I've always done well in school since kindergarten. I've always went to those bad schools, public schools or whatever, primary school and secondary school. And I never was made fun of. And I always was on honor rolls and always, education was coping for me. My father has an 8th grade education. No one else in my immediate family, my 3 older brothers or my parents, have anything more than a high school diploma, right? So in some respects, I'm a unicorn where I've come up from. And I always was positively reinforced for learning. So, acting white is a theory actually created in 1986 by 2 black scholars, John Ogbu, Signithium Fordham. They were doing a study in Washington, D.C. high school. Most of those kids were from the Southeast, which was like the hood in D.C., right? And then they heard, I guess some of the children say to the other children, you're acting white. Right? Then they create this theory called acting white theory. Right? Then we started testing it, meaning the social sciences thereafter. Keep in mind, these are 2 black scholars. John Ogbu was actually Nigerian, right? He doesn't really culturally understand black American children, right? And then you have Signithium Fordham, who's not really from the neighborhood. She's black, but she's, a different class of blackness, right? And there's no knock against them, but she too does not understand the children culturally. So I'm an ethnographer like they are, right? So, and number one thing that we say in ethnography is, I know what a person says, but what do they mean? Cultural interpretations are very important. Different ethnic groups, black ethnic groups, we have different cultural worldviews and orientations of the world. So so it's difficult. We may be using the same words, but we're not actually interpreting experiences in many instances in the same way, right? So they heard the kids say that, but they misinterpreted what they were saying. Acting white theory is now debunked because there's no evidence of poor black children anywhere in mass devaluing learning. Something is going on though. We got to frame it correctly. But first thing that's important to get on the table is what we have evidence of is these kids do love learning. You know what I mean? Definitely in Harlem, love learning. When I got my PhD, the hustlers say, come out with the PhD diploma. And I did to the barbecue, put it in the air, and everybody applauded. I heard that. All right. Street Par is also born out of, right? I created Street Par in 2005. Street Par is also born out of or in response to the argument that we don't like learning, right? Because I only work with those who have experiences in the streets, may have done poorly in school, and if that was true, then then who would ever show up to my projects? Right? We're going to read some journal articles. We're going to get in front of a few academic crowds. We're going to get taught how to run an analysis or two. Some of us are going to move into college, right? And I only want to work with those. I don't cream. I don't say, well, you're from the streets, but therefore you have, but I think you have a set of experiences which means you're going to really do well in school, so therefore I'm going to pick you. No, I mean, I'll pick that person too, but I'll pick the person who doesn't have great experiences in schools or wherever, and we'll get you there. I just got to figure out your motivation, or you down to do a little bit of activism, right? And now we can get busy, right? So if it was not true, if it was true, acting white, then street part would have never worked. Street part, it literally is in response to acting white theory. Now, more specifically, what's going on inside these classrooms? Learning is a cultural experience. It is not a universal experience where we can just get a curriculum and I can give it to you and I give it to you and I give it to you, right? Learning, that's, and as academics, we know that. Okay. Even the math is cultural, right? We know that. Young children, particularly young oppressed black children, they may not have the language to articulate what's going on inside these schools, but they know something is up. What is Ann Arnett Ferguson, a very prominent urban education scholar who's written extensively about the acting white theory, black woman, does a wonderful ethnography out in California too on this very topic. What does she say? The most predictive variable of doing well in school is the mastery, I'm using her language, of a white American value system. That's what's going to get your A, right? More than anything else. You gotta work hard, you gotta do the assignments. Okay, I get that, right? But at some point we're having a cultural experience inside the classroom, right? And Pygmalion theory, which I talk about in there, or teacher expectation theory, right? At the end of the day, your grade will ultimately be determined by what I think about you. Most of our teachers, particularly in public schools, 85 to 90% of them are white women by design. You can't find one white school anywhere in the country where those children are mostly taught by black children, by black women. Black women, excuse me. Okay. Can't find one example of it. While the vast majority of ours are taught by someone outside the community. Hold on, what's going on? Hold on, what's going on here? Those children, right, in those classrooms, particularly when they get to about 4th grade, particularly the males, they see what's up. They can't put the language in there, but they know they're being mistreated. They know that this white teacher, woman, maybe male, don't truly understand them. The curriculum doesn't reflect their life. And the way we think about learning, right, you know, interestingly enough, is we're going to go to this school, and this school is going to teach us something to improve our standing in our neighborhoods. That never happens in school. The point of school is not to empower you to get out of your poverty.
It's designed to keep you in it.
But the kids are showing up. The kids are showing up because they're coming from a cultural orientation that's teaching them that. Families, communities, like everything that you just read. The kids are calling up, okay, that sounds like it makes intuitive sense. Okay, when I'm going to get into the classroom and read the book where it's going to teach me how to improve my standing with housing and work and these politicians and I got to get my bank account, where are those classes at? That teacher talking to me about Shakespeare and everything else that
none of the things that matter about life.
So what's going to happen at some point, particularly with the males?
We had home economics, wood shop, metal shop, mechanics. You understand? When we were coming up, it was like they were teaching us how to be robots, basically, to work. But that was good because we were getting trades. You know what I'm saying? And skills. And when they seen that you got out of high school and you started your own electrical company, because you wasn't working for nobody because you already had the proper skills. So you just went uptown and got the business license. They didn't like that. They thought that was bad. But our community was rising. You feel what I'm saying? We were supporting each other.
So, I mean, absolutely. Right? And so at the end of the day, right, school is supposed to be a place where we go to learn, right, empower ourselves to solve our problems. Right? School has never been that, right? Now, the boys are going to act up starting in 4th grade, right? People have been studying this. 4th grade is when you begin to see the acting up at. So what are the kids, I know what they said, you're acting white, but the ethnographer, the scholar's job is, what do they mean? They can't, they're kids. They're not going to be as articulate as we are. Okay, what they mean is, why you sound like that? Why are you writing like that to the kids that are doing well? Right? Now, nobody's ever said that to me because I was never perceived to be that way. You know what I mean? I was perceived rightly or wrongly, I think rightly, to carry my learning in a certain way. Now, it doesn't mean that the kids that are hurting and blaming and making fun of, it don't mean that they don't get it wrong sometimes, as probably was the case with your niece, right? So it doesn't mean that that can't happen too. But in general, what is that kid saying? Why are you sounding like that to get an A? Why are you walking like that and dressing like that to get? Did you just see what that teacher did and said? Do you see what we're reading? Why don't you say something about it? Why are you just in complete compliance and being just totally submissive, right? Rightly or wrongly, the children don't have any real power. The kid 9 times out of 10 is just trying to do well, right? And has assimilated, right? This is what Annette Ferguson writes in her study, because she looks at low income versus middle income black boys, and she realized the middle income black boys are coming from homes because she would go to their homes where their parents are teaching them to assimilate in their classroom. The low income black boys are showing up, and their parents ain't teach them that, right? By and large, and they're looking for fairness in a world that's not fair, and when they don't experience that. What? And they're just kicking up dust. I used to do street par in schools before I came to Delaware.
Really?
I go to the big bad schools. It's the only place I want to go. Right? And when I go in there, send me all your bad kids. I don't cream. Creaming is an educational term, meaning you like charter schools cream. You know, they just recruit those kids from the hood that they know already going to do well. Right? So then they can say, look at how. Well, what about the other kids? Send me only your worst kids. And they always give me last period. I don't know why, but okay, cool.
Because you last. You're still part of their system of structure to be not doing for the community.
Yes, sir.
So they're not going to put you first. So all the so-called white people in the building can hear what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
Most of the people that's hearing what you're saying is the people that need it, not the people that, you know, the white people. You know what I'm saying? They need to hear it too.
Yes, sir.
So they can
Yes,
understand what's going on and how, you know.
Yes, sir.
But they never do that. They always structure it to put the most meaningful thing in the rear.
Yes, sir.
You know? And it can be anything. You know what I'm saying? If it's meaningful to us, it could be a white person explaining what you're doing. But they'll be last now.
Yes, sir.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
so
sir.
that's deep to me. You know?
Yeah.
And that's in a lot of things.
Just really quickly. So what became most disturbing to this one school in Paterson, New Jersey, to the teachers about the whole street park program, I only went to bad kids. You see, they showed up to my class every day in 8th grade, in 8th period. Right? They were in high school. But they were skipping a lot of the other classes. Classes and or the teachers they did not respect. Mind you, this is the kicker. My class is the most difficult class in the building. And they show up and the teachers started getting upset, jealous, I don't know, like what's going on?
Exactly, upset and jealous because you're communicating, you're getting responses out of these students that they thought was, you know, bad or unruly and all these other things when, okay, this is a good for instance. If you're doing something, right, you're telling me something that don't go along with my mind. My mind won't let me listen to you.
That's right. That's right.
It ain't about me.
That's right.
It's my mind won't accept it.
That's right.
You know,
yes, sir.
of course, one of the things that keeps coming up and you keep mentioning, and a lot of our listeners may not be aware of or know exactly what it is. What is PAR?
Great question. PAR is Participatory Action Research, and it's a methodology. It's a way of doing research, right? There are all kinds of methods or ways of doing research that you're exposed to when you start trying to be a researcher. Then you have to identify one, like what's going to be your cup of tea, what's going to be the way you do it, right? I didn't create PAR. PAR was formally created in the 1930s or something, 1940s, by a guy by the name of Kurt Lewin. He gets the credit. We've always been, so it's PAR, Participatory Action Research, is when the researcher decides to include on the research team members of the population that they are studying, right? and you incorporate them into every aspect of the research process, right? From theory, methods, analysis, right? And then PAR is action, so you got to also do some activism or action on the ground with your group, right? And PAR is done in different ways, but some are more aggressive, some are least, right? But they are not supposed to be bystanders, you know, to a study. They are integral to the study. In the process, right, they are shaping the study, they're contributing to the study, they're co-authoring, they're reading. We take them out on the road, we present at academic conferences. That's what academics do a lot of, right? And they are to be paid. PAR, that's PAR writ large, and then I decided to create something called Street PAR, where my version of PAR is specifically, right, a methodology on PAR, but that squarely works with those who have experiences from the streets. My thing growing up was, who's helping that group, right? Growing up, I come from one of those families, you know, father, mother, 3 older brothers, and we were the family that controlled the project. So also, you know, I got, you know, in a kind of street life or street family, particularly like that, there's highs and lows. My family did well, right, but there were highs and lows. But being in that community, one of the things that I learned was, learning was value, and cooperative learning was value. And I wanted to figure out how to help friends and family that were going through it. My first PAR project is a street PAR project of me and my friends, which is my dissertation. We collected 400 surveys.
And this was before you got your PhD?
This is my dissertation.
Okay.
For my PhD.
Okay. All right.
And about 4 of us, and from Patrice, New Jersey, which is right outside of Harlem, one of the poorest cities in the country.
Right.
Rough city, right? But from P-Town to Harlem, because it's like a highway that connects P-Town to Harlem.
Right.
At one end is Harlem, and one end is Patrice. My thing is, we gotta help. You know, so what we do, we train these guys, and that was a very active street team, right? It was like bloods, great. It was a little bit of everything, but we were friends, and so there was a bond there long ago set up, which kind of cut through all of that. We came together, and man, you know, my thing was, let's keep us together. I don't want my guys are going in and out of jail anyway, you know, and what can I do that they can get into?
That'll keep them out of that direction of going in. But you gotta also realize that they meaning them, those, you know what I'm saying? They don't particularly want to see that done because that's their economical money. We are their money. The prison system is ran by that group that you're so trusted in helping, and they don't want that.
This is where my naivety in life blesses me and or us with the street PAR movement. At first, when I'm doing this stuff, I don't realize that. I'm thinking researcher world and whoever are looking for a methodology to work with those guys, and because at that time no one knew in the academy, social psychologists, how to do it, how to work cooperatively with the streets. I was like, okay, I'm gonna show you guys, because at that time they don't want to learn, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. So okay, cool.
And the people is scared of them. It's been so much propaganda put on them. They already coming in to that situation scared.
So I come in and I say, okay, we're gonna create this thing called street PAR, and we're gonna show you. We're gonna introduce a new methodology, and we're gonna show you that it can work out. I kept doing it, right? I've done a bunch of street PAR projects now, and I kept doing it. And basically I say to the academics, well, I figured it out. We got something now. They do want to do this and work and do activism and education. And, you know, and then there are a number of academics over the years who have been very supportive. Al Young, who you read the statement from, he's the chair of the sociology department at the University of Michigan. He's one of the top scholars in the country. The fact that he gave me a book endorsement, boom. Jamie Fader also gives me a book endorsement from Temple University. These are high-profile scholars for what it's worth, right? So people do show a lot of love too. It's both ends. But I also started realizing, like, hold on, why I feel like there should be more of us and powers that jump on it, because we figured it out,
Right. Yeah.
But what I realized eventually later. No, the powers that be do not want to figure out a scenario where we're helping large numbers of poor black men, street or otherwise, to get out of their poverty.
Right.
That's crazy.
That was a hard pill for me to swallow. I resisted it. That can't be true. You may have a few individuals here and there, but then that's when I started learning more about Derek Bell's critical race theory, structural violence theory. First of all, I won 3 major dissertation fellowships for the dissertation. I've gotten a lot of funding, good funding for my projects. The reason why I was getting this support, which is really unprecedented for projects like this, because it was believed that maybe you help a few, but most of them wouldn't take to that. They're not really interested.
Right. But come to find out,
boom!
And now it's working. Now it's working. Oh no, we got to stop this. Listen, I ain't got that 100 raps for you this month. I know, but something came up. I can't produce this, and you start hearing different stories from some of them people. You know what I'm saying? Because they see the progress.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And when they see progress in something that they want to stay messed up, it ain't necessarily got to be them, because everybody got a head over a head over a head, and how it's a chain of command type of thing, and that's what happens. If the person up the top that's giving you that check because you work in a college, you got somebody that's telling you what to do.
Yes, sir.
You understand?
Yes, sir.
So it ain't necessarily the person that's doing it. It can be that hierarchy. And that's what stops us. And you sometimes from doing what it is you can do more of. That is the reason. And we can't see that, and we still be doing it, going hard as we can, and you really getting nowhere, but you getting somewhere within yourself, because God bless you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It reminds me of when I ran Cease Violence.
Right.
And one of the things that we were charged with was to bring down the violence on the street.
Right.
And when we actually started doing so, the powers that be said, whoa, wait a minute. We didn't really want you to do anything about it. We just wanted to have the appearance that we were doing something about it.
And our name beside you going, yo, I had to do that.
Yeah. And it was, the publicity became more important than the actual work. And that's what happens. WHGE 95.3 FM.
Jesus. The
Open Eye will be right back with Dr. Payne and my partner in consciousness, Nsoromma.
What's going on, bro? I watch y'all every week, man.
Yo, what's going on? You dig me, Dr. Payne? You know what it is, Vaughn. What's happening? Sherry, what's good? Steve, yo, Nita. Hey, yo, you know what it is. Thanks for tuning in. Yo, Jabbar, what's good? Hey, yo, Romello. Yo, what's up, man? When you get back, hit me up. Yo.
WHGE 95.3, The Open Eye, with special guest, Dr. Yasser Payne. Yes, indeed, this has been a great discussion.
Yes,
right. Okay, one of the things, of course, that what you do is ethnology. What is ethnology, and where did that come from? And what motivated you or influenced you to get involved?
Ethnology is a branch, a method, but I don't do ethnology.
Okay.
But that is a formal method. I do ethnography.
Ethnography. Okay.
And there's similarly sounding words. So,
I meant ethnology.
Okay. So I'm a ethnographer, which is a methodology, and more specifically a street ethnographer. Right? Because you have a bunch of ethnographers. Ethnography is when the researcher decides to. Those researchers are very interested in the cultural. And the cultural analysis of a group.
Okay.
Most researchers are just, in the social sciences at least, it's more, the data that we use or deal with is more outcome data, right? So send me your schooling data, let me see how many people dropped out, graduated, enrolled, how many, what percentage of white people control the economy, 90%. That's raw data, that's outcome data, right? And then you have cultural data, right? Meaning, I want to know why, one moment they're wearing baggy jeans and the next moment they're wearing skinny jeans, and then, it's, or you have certain sayings, or you have certain perspectives or worldviews or orientations. outcome data is linear, right? And count 1 + 1 + 2 or 2 + 2, right? And cultural data is non-linear, right?
Okay.
So the only way you can study a group's culture is you have to immerse yourself in that group for a sustained period of time, right? So I'm interested in the ethnography of the streets.
Okay.
Right? So ethnography is a method designed to study a culture, local population's culture. Right? And we know we can't, there's only but so much you can learn about a group's culture from a book,
Right.
from the TV, from a classroom. At some point you have to walk amongst them, right? And so in my case, I hang out with those who have experiences in the streets. And the way I do my ethnography is through street par. So street par is an ethnographic method. Right? You have lots of street ethnographers that are out there. For the most part, they don't do street par or par. They're just going to a community. They're meeting a gatekeeper in the community. In my case, that was or community stakeholders, sometimes what we call them. But in my case, that was Woofy, and also was the Hope Commission at that time who introduced me to Woofy. And they were more community stakeholder, the Hope Commission from a more professional standpoint, and Woofy was, I'm going to be a stakeholder in the neighborhoods, kind of a thing. And the ethnographer generally would just build a relationship or rapport is what we write, or trust with the stakeholder, and then they introduce you to the community, and then at some point the study begins. And lots of ethnography, to be honest with you, is field observations. That's the key method. There are other methods, but a lot of times it's you showing up to all kinds of experiences in the community, and you are chronicling, you're documenting whatever it is that you are interested in studying. In my case, it's gun violence. So we did field observations in the local bars out here. We did field observations at the funerals, particularly where there were homicides. We've been on Miss Hoey. She has a every year for her son that she lost before I got here. I write a lot about Miss Hoey and her story in the book.
Let me just say that Cecilia Hoey, for those of you that may be familiar with her in the community.
Yeah, she has an annual walk that we attended. There are different experiences, right, that Wilmington has allowed me to be a part of.
Okay.
Spent a lot of times in funerals, homes, hospitals, right, and then you chronicle and you document that. Those experiences. We also up the ante with ethnography, because your average ethnographer is just going to do field observation and take field notes, which is good, right? But we're just getting started with that. We're going to go out and actually collect hundreds of surveys. Most ethnographers don't do that, right? And then with the study that we're talking about in Murdertown, USA, we're going to go to hot sites, warm sites and cool sites too, but we're going to go to where they're selling or where they're hustling at, with their permission and in a responsible way, and we're going to get them to fill out surveys in the hot site.
Now, my question is, like, when you go to the hot spots and talk to these shooting victims, right? Do you ever go as deep as to understand how it became to that point? Like, are you angry at the world type of thing with these people? Or, I mean, sometimes it ain't even about a gun. They argue without the gun. They kill each other with pencils and whatever's in their hand, because they angry individuals. Now, if you coming up and you dealing with an angry individual, they're not going to respond to the normal thing like you would expect, because they holding anger in. So in these surveys and tests, do you go above to, find out the mental state of that particular victim or individual? You know what I'm saying? Because it's just deeper than gun violence. So everybody, guns in the hood. How do guns get in the hood?
Yes.
The guns were bought in the hood through police officers in their trunk, pull the car up and leave it open, and then now the guns is in the hood.
Yes, sir.
Only the guns is in the service and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We ain't gonna be able to go down to ShopRite and pick up a 9 AR, whatever. How you can't do that.
Yes, sir. We're, I think, maybe the only research program that's studying gun violence on the ground that actually tests for psychological well-being.
Right.
When Newsweek came in, who actually created the title in Murdertown, USA, and they wrote the article 2014, we actually escorted Wolf and the guys in particular escorted Abigail Jones, the senior reporter who wrote that article. She interviewed all of us for that article as well. Right, but one of the things she writes in the article, to get at your question, she looked at our violence data. You know, she was like, okay, I get it. I see what's going on here. But the thing that's kind of jumping out at me, she said in my interview, is your data on psychological and social well-being. Yeah. Their mental, right?
Yeah.
And what do we find? Well, we find that, first of all, you have a mixed bag inside any community, but also a street community, right? You have variation. You do have some folk that are angry. You have a lot of folk that aren't. You have some folk that are in the middle. I mean, that is really how to understand street culture.
Right.
You know what I mean? One of the things, before I get to the well-being findings, one of the things that we know is this. Most guys in the streets are not violent as a form of identity. Where you're hustling that also, right, is where you're going to find that, say it can't happen, but you're going to find the least amount of violence there. Because people are trying to make money, and at some point you can't make it too crazy or the customers won't come. That still can happen though, right? But the violence is more likely to take place in neutral areas, places like the club, the lounge, I see you, and we got beef at the street corner, grocery store, or places like that, the basketball court, right? In terms of where it actually happens. Right? The violence is actually more controlled than we think. Within a group of 30, there's one book I'm thinking about called Bleeding Out, which everybody's kind of reading right now. But what does he argue? Thomas App is his name. Out of a group of 30, you probably, gang members, you probably have 5 that are violent as a form of identity. That's the pure shooter,
right?
The muscle,
right?
Most guys don't mean you can't even get. It doesn't mean you can't even get hurt by the other guys, but most of the violence is actually situational. And at the very least, I would say maybe retaliatory.
Right.
But most guys is not running around and
violent.
When you in the streets, you realize that, and therefore you know how to. It helps you to navigate in the streets. Most of these guys ain't on it like that. You know, if they can get it off, and if it's a situation, then great. But you know, so. That's how I know we can go out there and nothing's going to happen. We don't have to be afraid of each other. Less than 1% of the U.S. population is actually killed by another human being. Most people who actually die from gun violence are dying from suicide, and those are mostly white men, right? There's probably approximately 7,000 to 8,000 black men that shoot and kill each other each year. On average, there's about 17,000 to 18,000 homicides per year, with the exceptions of the George Floyd years where we've seen an uptick, right? You're more likely to die from a car accident, from overdose. That's where 17,000, 18,000 people get killed, and that's across race, right? But when you see like hundreds of thousands of people getting killed, that's drug overdose. That's all the other stuff we're not really talking about, right? The idea that you're going to run around and walk around and someone's just going to harm you for standing there, not saying it's going to can't happen, but it's very unlikely to happen. There is no wild west scenario any place in the country. That's including Wilmington, Delaware. Contrary to what they say on the media, if a city was that crazy, they would just send in the National Guard yesterday. And some have.
Right.
You know, and they can get that over with real quick. Bing, there's no place where you're going to just... So then we have to, because the YouTube videos, media. Chicago's in a 25-year low for homicides.
How about that?
Wilmington's homicide per capita rate, as we write in the book, is almost almost twice the homicide per capita rate of Chicago for at least the last 15 years.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Go.
But if you're not being heard with these statistics and they getting it through the propaganda media, you on open eye right now. Right. So you able to give it the real. It's coming out.
Which brings me to a question that I want to bring up here. And a mythology, okay? And this is a mythology that is pushed by white supremacists and also black conservatives like notorious Negro Peon Bear Witch Candace Owens, okay? And that's the 1350 theory, that 13% of the population is committing 50% of the violence, of the murders, okay? And it also brings me around to black self-hate. And that mythology, how real is that? Black self-hate. Because one of the things I know that came out of Murder Town, USA, I think one of the most important chapters is the chapter where you talk about self-love.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right. Yes, sir. Less than 1% of Black America is responsible for all of Black America's crime. Mm-hmm. Right. Less than 1% of Black folk in this country is responsible for all of its crime. Mm-hmm. Right. Also, on average, anywhere between 1 to 5% of any city in the country is responsible for all of its gun violence. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'm not sure what statistics she's drawing off of or what source.
And they made it up.
And maybe do that. Like, I'm not sure where she's getting. I study gun violence. I study crime. Most people in the country, they have to socially engineer, rewrite the laws, create crimes, and start locking people up.
Right.
You have to understand that's the hyper criminalization of people. You know what I mean? But the street love chapter, right? And I wonder, I said to my criminologist friends, why aren't we writing about this aspect of the streets, right? About how many in the streets actually love themselves, their families, their communities, their children, they believe in God. Why aren't we writing about this part of their personality as well? This is what Abigail Jones said in the Newsweek article. She was mostly alarmed by that data.
Right.
She says,
they
hold
only
on.
show bad things about them.
She got on the phone, she said, their esteem is high, and she identified Black men and women. Esteem is generally higher, most poor people though, esteem is generally higher than the broader society. So hold on, they love themselves more than, yes. They have higher levels of social well-being more than people outside. Yes. That's true for most poor populations. That's across white populations. So read a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, right? I got a number of his books. Outliers, one of his New York Times bestsellers. In the first chapter, I think, he's writing about European immigrants who moved over here, first generation. He's looking at their next generation, their children, their children's children, and they're becoming much more educated, professional. They work out every day, they're vegan, and they're dropping dead. The first generation immigrants, he writes, man, they drinking, they smoking cigarettes, they talking on the damn porch all night, and they're much happier and they're living longer. Poor people don't have stress, right? Poor people don't have a lot. They do have a little stress though. Poor people don't have a lot, but one thing that poor people have is they have each other. Right? Us professionals are more likely to see a therapist. We're working 80, 90 hours a week. We lead very isolated lifestyles. And if you're Black and professional, right, it's even more isolated. Right? And that is what's catching up with you at a psychic level. Right? In any event, with regard to street love chapter though, right, we reject terms like maladaptive, deviant, self-hating. There is a robust self-hatred literature. That's actually how Brown versus Board won the case. They made the argument that all of these Black children, Wilmington is one of the original Brown versus Board cities, and they made the argument, Lewis Redding, Thurgood Marshall and folk, that these Black children hate themselves so much that we need to integrate these schools, white schools, we need to go about desegregation so that they can sit next to white children who love themselves, and they can maybe through social osmosis demonstrate to these Black children how to love themselves.
Wow.
That's what actually won Brown versus Board.
That's so crazy.
Right? Yeah. So that's where the narrative of poor Black children having low self-esteem, and that was socially engineered by these attorneys to win the case. They actually never believed it. There was no evidence to support it. They tried to bring about the doll studies. Then one of my doctoral advisors, in his most famous book, what's Bill Cross's famous book? Oh God, it'll come to me.
You said the doll studies.
The doll
when
studies.
They took a Black doll and a white doll and said which doll you were going to be in, like that.
And the best kid would pick the white doll
all the time. Yeah,
they said, look at these Black kids crying when you try and give them the Black doll. That's what Thurgood Nolan was saying.
Wow.
And we got to, Kenneth and Mamie Clark, they were social psychologists. They did the doll studies for these attorneys. Right? So what did we find when Bill Cross, whose book I'm blanking on right now, his title, when he actually re-examines the doll study data in the 1980s. The book comes out in 91. They found that most of the Black children during the doll studies actually picked the Black doll. They didn't pick the white doll.
How about that?
Because it was propaganda saying that they picked the white doll anyway. They ain't going to give you the real news.
No.
It's against the structure.
Right.
We don't hate ourselves. We love ourselves.
Right. And my feeling on school integration, of course, was influenced by my mother.
Right.
Okay? And my mother came from Howard High School class of 1952, which was one of the most successful classes.
Right.
And she was part of that success. Okay? Her ideal, her stance was, we need to desegregate the resources. We were turning out quality, this is what she taught. We were turning out quality students with substandard resources. Imagine what we would do with proper resources.
Right.
Okay?
That's right.
Now, one of the things that, we've been talking about is black self-love. Which brings me to my next question. And this will probably be my final question. Believe it or not, this hour is...
Get out of here. I'm just getting started. What is going on?
I heard that. Okay. And that is how we have dealt with adversity. And the way we have dealt with adversity is by going to sites of resilience.
Yes,
right.
Tell us about sites of resilience.
Yes, sir. Sites of resilience theory is a theory that we created, is born out of the streets and all of our research from the streets and the Street Par Associates. Right? Again, the academics, media, city state officials, right, politicians have socially engineered this narrative since '54 that we have low self-esteem and we hate ourselves. We now know from the research that is not true. We're one of the only research programs that's testing it in the streets, and we see that's not true there neither. Right? If they can put that on you,
right,
you're maladaptive, you're deviant, you hate yourselves, then policies come running behind that, right? To now police that.
Right.
Control and contain that.
Of course.
Right? Because something is wrong with you.
Right.
You might snap out. I don't know.
Right.
You know? And then they say, and that's the hypercriminalization. That's the creation now of new laws, now to incarcerate our babies. Right? So at the end of the day, we realize what? Hold on. We're not a self-hating people. We're a loving people, including the folk in the streets. Therefore, we are a resilient people. In Harlem, you hear that you hear two things. We're a resilient people, and you hear this is the land where the black man is God. That's just all in the air. Right? It's normal language actually there, right? But I've learned, I didn't learn black folk were not resilient until I started working on a PhD. I started delving into resilience literature, which is big in psychology,
right.
And I started reading all these studies and arguments, even by black scholars, that poor black people, and definitely the folk I want to work with, the streets, is a non-resilient group. I started reading this stuff as a doctoral student. No, mas, nope. And now I dedicated my life to talking about how this group is resilient. Now, when I come to the neighborhoods, they can't believe this is how we're writing about you. This is the people who smile all the time, right? The academics, the folk who pray all the time. We are writing about the streets and poor black communities in a particular kind of way,
right,
which legitimizes and justifies what the state or oppressive forces are doing. That's how it all works in tandem. We provide the legitimization, we get on TV, we write our books, we say there's something's wrong with them, and then they come in heavy-fisted, right, to regulate it all. It's important, project in and project out, to underscore we are a resilient people. So we ultimately write that gun violence is a site of resilience. By that, we don't mean gun violence is a good thing. What we're saying is this is the way, because of forced extreme poverty, that some folk are looking to ensure their survivability. There's no way to engage in street culture. At some point, differences will be settled with a gun.
Yes.
The way to end it, and the only thing, the best thing that we know to end gun violence and all that good stuff, is what we ultimately call for at the end of the book, right, is addressing the structural violence complex. We don't know anything that works better to bring down violence in a job, a high quality job, or our own opportunity and capital. And ultimately, what do we need is a robust black reparations package, a multi-trillion-dollar package, and we can't let our feet off the gas.
No.
Right.
We presented. Wilmington has a black reparations committee. Wolfie is on that committee. I presented there last year with regard to the economic background of Black Wilmington. Dr. Ann Aviles, she presented to the committee with regard to the housing experiences of Black Wilmington. We don't let up. It's a legal case.
Right.
That's why it's not going nowhere anyway.
Right.
It's not going away anytime soon, right? Because you can't do what you've done to us and then give reparations to other groups. And there's no group that qualifies for it more than us.
How about that? You got that right. Yeah.
Just give me my capital. You ain't got to like me or love me. You ain't got to. I don't care if you think about me as an N-word. Hey, if you give me my capital, then I'm going to be self-determined. Our group will be, right? And because we are resilient, we are God's first children. The oldest blood in the world flows through our veins.
Amen.
Right?
Yes, indeed.
Therefore, for us to make it through all of this crazy chaos over the last 5,000-6,000 years,
right, and still standing on 2 feet,
came out kicking on the other side. Because we are resilient, brother.
We are resilient.
Including those guys on the corner. Those guys on the corner, and I'll end here. They just want an opportunity.
If you give if you give that person that opportunity, right, and they start making $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 a year, and they have grown now responsibility. So some of the things that they do on the street that they used to do, they'll look at that wrong their self, and they'll realize that the streets is not worth me taking care of my family. I mean, I was on the streets, yeah, I was making money, but I wasn't making it like this. I ain't have medical for my family and stuff like that. I'm the leader of my family. I am the chief, and I have a responsibility to take care of my kids, my Ibns. You know what I'm saying? and so they won't put us in position to do that.
No.
That's where the problem lies a lot, I think.
Yes, it does. And I will say this about that problem. Okay, one of the things that I noticed, one of the effects that the crack epidemic had,
right,
and this was their goal,
right,
okay, was to remove a generation of leadership.
Yes.
Because when we were coming up, okay, when we got involved in street life, there was the older generation that imposed the rules on us.
right.
Not only imposed them, but they taught us, and they taught us why those rules were in place.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was part of what? Sites of resilience. When you had a young man like yourself, when you were a young man, Dr. Payne, that showed academic talent, that young man was pushed.
Yes.
By the older generation.
Yes.
That young person was pushed.
They wouldn't let you come out there and be on the corner with
No,
them.
they wouldn't.
They,
And I had that happen to one of my proteges. Like you said, wouldn't let them come out on the corner.
Man, get out here, man. You know what I'm saying?
He had problems, and some emotional problems. And one of the things that came out of that in our discussions was he was actually brilliant. And because of his brilliance, he shined in school. Now, he tried to hide that from his friends because he wanted to hang out on the corner with them. And when some of his real friends found out that he had academic talent, that he was doing well in school, they didn't allow him out there. And, you know, it's something that I had one of these young people who recognized the older generation as leadership. I was behind him in my car, and he's sitting there.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you waiting for the red light to turn green? So I bumped my horn. And he still sat there. And I bumped my horn again. Now this young man jumps out the car and he comes running back to my car. And he looks in the car and he says, "Oh, Uncle Pat." I said, "What were you going to do, brother?" You know? And the thing is, he couldn't allow anyone to make him a chump. So me behind him, blowing my horn. And
say, hurry up, man. Come on, get it moving. I'm ready.
Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. But because of his recognition of street leadership.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He seen it was you.
He saw it was
Mr.
me.
Gibbs, Uncle Pat.
Uncle Pat.
You know what I'm saying?
And this is what happens with street leadership.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes,
it got cut off immediately.
That's why they had to get that out of the way.
They had to get that out the way.
Now,
they had to get that out the way.
now, right? In the situations like that, now they don't have that, so they on cut on. Just on cut on. If I ain't know you and I came in the car like that, how about it was somebody like me back there?
Yeah.
And I'm on go too.
You want that?
You know what I'm saying? When he got out of the car, I would have mini.
Yeah.
It's different. You know what I'm saying?
You know, and even with, you know, demise or taken away from our street leadership. Okay, even with that, you still have those that come forward and show that leadership and are respected. Once again, that brings me to what you said, sites of resilience.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sites of resilience in that older generation imposing the rules and what have you, and they wanted that gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
More of us have to come into awareness that the black family and the black community is being broken up and turned against one another, up to and including street leadership, the black couple, so many different levels. And they're pouring resources every generation into the breaking up. The second book, which focuses on the North Side and West Side, which I'll be working on, right, is really going to look at that argument of how family disruption is really predictive of the gun violence, right? But there is an agenda to turn younger against older, men against women, right?
Well, we
Keep us in disarray, gentrify our communities, and then call it help, right?
They even saying as far as if your kid is 6 years old and they got the right to call the police on you and tell you she ain't letting me be who I want to be. I want to be a little girl and I'm a boy. What kind of thinking is that?
Yes. Yeah.
And they're trying to make that a legal thing. What kind of thinking is that from the higher ups? You know, that's
well, you know, like Dr. Payne said, you know, the goal is to break up our communities, is to break up our sense of unity, is to break up our sense of family,
right?
Is to get rid of those sites of resiliency. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. We will be back with the close of the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
That was a quick hour, man.
They go by quick anyway, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We on the way out. That's okay. I'm just on break.
Peace and love.
All right. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs.
Nsoromma in the building.
And joined by Dr. Payne. To close out the show, Dr. Payne, I want to ask you, because I was part of the first PAR team, what has become of your PAR team, the first PAR team? Give us, just a short idea on that.
So we're 4 projects in, and then with Dr. Ann Aviles, we're now 6 projects in. So we did the East Side South Bridge, and then we metastasized, evolved to the North Side West Side project, and then we got another grant which involved the North Side West Side, and now we have a national study in 4 cities. Wilmington is one of those 4, but also Detroit, Philadelphia, and Brooklyn, New York, all based off of the original Wilmington model. Right. Many are doing well. Right. You know, we have some highs and lows. We've lost a few brothers along the way. Right about that Murder Town, USA. Kenyatta Brooks is definitely one of those brothers who I was real close with. And we lost him. We had a memorial for him too at the opening of the Center for Structural Equality, which is ran by Darrell Chambers now. We lost Feet, Dennis Watson. Man, we lost a few over the years, man. But in any event, a number of folk are doing well. I will say that. From that original cohort of 15, 6 went to college. Most of those 15 I met them 6 months or so, 6 months to a year out of prison is when I meet them, right? So they're coming fresh, many of them fresh from the streets. 6 of them of the original 15 went to the street. A number of folk have opened up their own nonprofits, agencies, working well. ACLUs are giving out employment. The Delaware Center for Justice, Christina Cultural Arts Center, University of Delaware, Christiana Care Hospital. They're hiring, our guys, giving them real jobs too. Because I always say, how can you help? Well, they need a salary. That's like the other salary of the other folk in it, and they need an office like the other offices of the other folk, and they need to all share the same secretary. That's what help looks like for me. And folks started doing that, right? You got Tiana Russell, she's down in Ferris. So a lot of folk are doing well. And one of the things that Wolf is big on, come in, be a part of a project or 2 or 3 in some cases, but at some point you got to get out and start your own thing. And we'll help you. But you got to start your own thing. You got to jumpstart your own set. Right, we are the larger gang, so to speak. Right, but now it's, and like with most gangs, it metastasizes. Now it's time for you to be a boss in what you do, right? And
over in this area,
and then we bring in a new crew and a new crop.
Right.
You know what I mean, so we become self-perpetuating. You know what I mean? Pat Gibbs has always done his thing. You know what I mean? He's a great example of just creating his own thing, his own lane, and also we all still stay connected.
Yes,
right. The greatest asset we have is each other.
Right.
And we got to remember what Michelle Alexander is trying to teach us in the new Jim Crow. Right. They are. What are they invested in? The powers that be. The impression of change, not real change. You start doing real change, like you said, woman to cease violence. Hold on.
Wait a minute, it's working.
Yeah. But we have to at some point realize you are the change.
Right.
You are the leadership. We got to stand. These young boys actually want leadership.
And they're watching.
They're watching us.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to take back our community. You ain't got no friends. I'm being honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
You ain't got no friends now.
Dr. Clark.
I mean, yeah.
So a lot of folk are doing well. A lot of folk are in school still. And then with the success of also street park projects, a lot of folk from those teams are doing well too. Folk are competing. My only issue is, particularly in a small city and small state, but even in the case with big cities, is we've metastasized to a number. Right? You have to understand is we're around 200 deep when you add in all of the members, all of the associates, right, or honorary members, all of the graduate students and undergrad students, all of the faculty, all of our formal partners. And I have an organizational chart there to kind of break it down.
Right.
When you add up all of these people, we're it's like, man. So what do we got to get prepared for? Well, how are they going to come in, the powers that be, to create division? Give this person one thing and give this another, and then get in the ear of this one, and then get them going at each other. We're at that stage in the game. We're 13 years in now, something like that, right? But we're at the stage of the game where our integrity will be tested. You know what I mean? We got the center, we got this, everyone's doing their own thing, and everybody is really rocking and rolling.
Right.
We work in the Attorney General office. Man, these dudes is really from the block.
Right. Right.
I don't cream.
Right.
I heard that.
And now look at what we're doing, creating all kind of, like Wolf was saying, he said, some of these guys, man, they got their own movement by themselves. He's like, holy, he said, Michael Bartley, K.O., Dubois, Corey, what? Well, if you really see them move, they really moving.
Dr. Wilson.
Dr. Wilson. Now we rocking. Dr. Wilson are rocking in Philadelphia.
I heard that.
Like ABC, CBS, NBC, New York Times.
I said, what about your boy, Anderson?
Oh, Claude Anderson?
Yeah, Claude Anderson.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the PAR team.
Yeah,
I
PAR
mentioned
team.
Dr. Wilson.
Okay.
He was one of the, Jonathan Wilson was one of the original members of the PAR team.
Oh, okay.
Who during our PAR research
Right.
was actually shot.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But this brother who from street experience, okay?
Right.
And he is one of the people that I look at when I say, watch Dr. Payne.
Right.
Okay? Because the next group that he brings along is going to be a group of scholars from the street.
Yes, sir.
That's all right.
Yes, sir.
Have a last word, Dr. Payne, before we close out here?
Once again, our greatest asset is each other. They're breaking us apart, or trying. They're not going to, because prophecy said no. It's not going to happen. It's going to unveil itself in a certain way. We just have to reclaim ourselves. We have to be aware again. We have to remember who we always was. We are the oldest people on this planet, right? And our youth are looking for direction and guidance from us, the OGs, the big homies. Now it's time for us to step up. We're in the biggest fight of our life, and we gotta get ready. Right, and we did. I'm optimistic. I'm inspired. I'm empowered. You know what I'm saying? And we got to make sure our youth also gets that message too.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Payne.
Thank you, brother.
Murdertown USA is available on Amazon.com. Okay, do me a favor, our open eye listeners. You want this book? Believe me, it's a great read. You want this book? Yeah, okay. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Payne. And as I always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as an option.
Who treats you as a priority. You
Don't treat those as a priority.
Who treats you as an option? Look, he got it all messed up, Dr. Payne. Look at him. He's ready to go.
All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is Big, the Open Eye.
Y'all got. Yo, thanks for tuning in. You know what it is. Nsoromma in the building. Dr. Clark. That's what it is. Hey, yo, Mr. Gibbs, what's up?
Hey, like I always tell you, pay attention. See what's going on. Okay? Don't let them feed you the propaganda. Global African supremacy. It's coming. It's here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because the world was a much better place when the black man ruled.
Y'all got, yo, streaming all platforms, you know what it is. Go get that Mr. Gibbs, Nsoromma. Dr. Payne, you got anything to say?
Listen, man, at the end of the day, the holy war has begun. It's time to be the prophet that you always was. Stand up, be strong, and lead, because your people and your loved ones need you to. Till next time, y'all, open eye.
Yaga!
All right. Now that's yours. That's mine.
Yo. Yeah, and I want to get a little shot with you, bro.